In this video, you're going to learn the number one thing that I find a lot of people doing wrong as they have a competition coming up. And it's not even like a jiu-jitsu principle, it's just a sports science principle. So whenever we have any sort of sport and competition coming up, or any sort of sport and endeavor that we're going to try and participate in coming up, there's a couple of different principles that we have to address in order to have you at your highest state of readiness possible on the day. Because ultimately, that's what we want. We want you best prepared and best ready to give your best efforts on the competition day. That should be the goal of our strength and conditioning, and that should be the goal of all of our accumulation of training camp up to this time. Like anything, we want to present our best face on competition day, and we want to do everything in our preparation to make sure that we're as ready as possible to produce the nicest competition efforts that we can on the day that matters. The first principle that we're going to have to spend a little bit of time adhering to is the principle of volume and intensity. As competition approaches, we're going to want to see that volume start to come down, and we're going to want to see our intensity start to come up. And these two things can mean slightly different things in the different context of whether we're looking at lifting in the gym and our physical preparation, or whether we're looking at jiu-jitsu. When it comes to lifting weights and we talk about volume and we talk about intensity, volume is how much total work you're doing in the gym, i.e. the sets times the reps times the weight. And then intensity is what percentage of that weight is relative to your 1 rep max. And this is absolutely true. We want to apply the principle of manipulating our volume and intensity as competition approaches, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. When it comes to jiu-jitsu, I think we should be applying these exact same principles. I'm lucky to train in a place that does, and we should be applying the principles of overall reducing our big general volume, so we're not just doing crazy amounts of rounds as competition approaches. Upping our intensity, i.e. how close are our efforts on the mats in the club close to the competition style efforts that we're going to produce. Because ideally, if we're moving from a place of manipulating this volume and intensity and we're adhering to these principles, we should be able to get to a really nice place with both our physical preparation and our jiu-jitsu. But when it comes to our strength and conditioning, we're going to see all of our volume done in the off season. This is where we're going to build all of our strength, build a lot of our muscle tissue, and this is where we're going to have the most capacity for recovery, the most capacity so if something goes wrong, we still have a large amount of time away from the competition. Overall, this is where we're going to see the most volume done in the competition cycle. And then as we get closer to the competition, we're going to see the volume come down, and that's because we don't want to overload the athlete and we don't want to give them a huge amount of volume and a huge amount of work to do as competition approaches, and the efforts should become more specific, more competition style. So on the flip side of that, when we're far out from competition, we don't want to be dealing with really intense efforts, because how are we going to increase the intensity closer to competition? And we really want to play these two principles in tandem against each other. We want to see the overall volume, particularly the non-specific junk volume, come down, and then we want to see the specific competition intensity come up. Whereas there might be a counterpoint to say, oh, but surely we're going to do more training as the competition approaches. Yeah, you should be doing more specific style efforts, but truthfully, if you're doing those akin to what they should be, which is high intensity competition style efforts, you won't be able to do a huge volume of them. And if you do try to do a big volume of them, you'll be disobeying the principle and you'll hurt yourself. And yeah, you might get away with it once or twice, but over time, this isn't really a good idea. So in the grand framing of things, that's how we can take our off-season preparation and our competition style day, and we can manipulate these two things as this day approaches. It's important to remember that as we approach the competition day, it's important to take your recovery seriously. Because, by definition, you're going to be less recovered at this time because we'll have done the most work, we'll have been training concurrently for the most amount of time, and the efforts, again, are going to be really intense and competition style. So a combination of those and the fact that you're not necessarily at your most recovered, it's really important that you adhere to all these other recovery principles properly. So it's just important that as the work ramps up here, that you focus on the principles of nutrition, sleep, and getting some quality time to chill out and de-stress. Because focusing on these big three principles is going to be the best thing that you can probably do as an aggregate over time to really affect your recovery. All right, that's grand in a principled sense, but in a real sense, how does the training, certainly in the gym, actually change as the competition approaches? So with regard to how our training changes then, how our strength and conditioning changes as competition approaches, and how we would adhere to these two principles, we would look to manipulate our training by doing a lot of our high volume, compound, multi-joint work away out from the competition. Slower work, strength work, away out from the competition. And then as we transition to the competition, we're going to transition our squats to jumps, our deadlifts to jumps, our bench press and our rows to throws or speed rows. And we're going to do movements that allow us to exhibit greater velocity in the athlete's movement and adhere to a principle that we're going to cover later in the video. And a combination of these two things over time is pretty much how your training should change. There should be a change in the movements that we select as the training phase changes. And then there should just be a change in the overall focus of why we're doing the training and what the different principles that we're pertaining to at the time are. And the other principle, and the reason that we would change a lot of the movements that we want to adhere to, is the principle of the force velocity curve. So effectively, our job as S&C coaches is to move our athletes down this curve as competition approaches, although that depends on the actual competition and needs of the sport itself. In a sport that has a higher force and velocity demand, we'd be looking to move the athlete the other way. Jiu-Jitsu as a generality tends to fall about in the middle of the curve, with some variance for gi or no gi. No gi, a little bit more velocity based, the gi, a little bit more force based. But overall, as Jiu-Jitsu athletes, you want access to a wide myriad of different physical attributes. But this is just one of the things that we do to manipulate our training over time and give the athlete access to a greater rate of force development as the competition approaches. That's all well and good, but what do you actually do then on the week of competition? On the week of competition, one of the main things that you want to do is you want to adhere to the principle of keeping your volume low, and you really shouldn't do that much training on the week of competition. Honestly, all of your training really should be jiu-jitsu, as you're not going to be developing any physical qualities in these couple of days. You've done all the development of the physical qualities in the weeks previous to this. However, a lot of guys, and I get a lot of my guys who just do a day one, they usually do a day one on the Monday or the Tuesday, but I often say to them that Wednesday is the absolute latest day of the week if they're competing on the weekend. Usually going to have a very strict jiu-jitsu routine that they tend to do around that time, and we really do not want to interfere with that. Because when it comes close to the actual sporting event and it is time that all the preparation is done and now we're going to go compete, it is no longer preparation time, it is sport time, and we really want to let the athlete do whatever it is that they need to do to get themselves psychologically where they need to be. And we really don't want to do anything to distract the athlete by adding extra training sessions or any sort of extra volume. The only thing that's probably appropriate is maybe some sort of warm-up routine or something that gives the athlete grounding and centering. And then other than that, I would just make sure that all the normal things, eating well, well recovered, sleeping well, and trying my best to prepare for the actual comp day itself. The number one thing that I see a huge amount of people do absolutely wrong is they do not address any of the principles that I've just talked about in this video, and they just do not change their training as the competition approaches. As competition approaches, they probably crank it up in effort. They probably start to go heavier on things because they feel like, oh, the competition's coming up, I need to work harder, I'm not working hard enough. And oftentimes when people don't know what that hard training should look like, it ends up looking like just more weight on the bar, more volume arbitrarily tacked in, and that usually does not end well for people. So that would be my main point of advice, which is like, just take the principles that we've ran through in this video, have a look at your training as a competition approaches and say, okay, am I broadly applying these principles to my preparation? Because yeah, like you can get coaching and you can get highly specific, and that's really good and it really fucking works, but just applying these principles in a general sense will certainly add something to your preparation. And it'll also give you like a better understanding of what the phases of training look like, and that can only inform you better for when you have to do more and more competitions in the future. If you enjoy competing in jiu-jitsu and it's fun and you like it, you might as well get good at these little micro skills that go along with the skills of competing to make the eventualities there better. And the last principle that I want to talk about is a bit of a bonus principle, is intensification. But specifically, I want to talk a little bit about this in regards to jiu-jitsu. I'm really lucky that I train in one of the top academies in Europe, and without a doubt the top academy in Ireland, that's East Coast Jiu-Jitsu Academy, and I've been training there for a long time. And one of the great things about East Coast is they have a really good ethos of competition, and the lads there, the coaches, the head coach and all the other coaches there, they understand how to compete. They're European champions and they really know what wins at a good level in jiu-jitsu. As a result of that, we get really, really good training, and I'm going to training 10 o'clock tomorrow morning at the competition training, and we'll get really nice competition style efforts with really good specific focus on what we would need to work on to win big competitions. And I'm so lucky that I don't have to think about this with my own jiu-jitsu, because I'm in a place where the thinking is done for me with regards to that. I can just show up, do what I'm told. And this is what I do for my athletes with the strength and conditioning side of things, is I say, I'm going to do all the thinking for you so you don't have to, and then you can just show up and you can do the training. The reason that I bring this up is because this is true across both things. And if you find yourself in an environment where your training doesn't necessarily reflect the competition goals in a jiu-jitsu sense or in a weightlifting strength and conditioning sense, have a think about that and how much that might be affecting your preparation. Because while I'm very lucky to train at a place that takes these principles seriously and applies them with the training, I speak to a lot of my own clients and I speak to a lot of other people around the world that don't have access to that, and I really think people underestimate the difference that it really makes. Because all that we're really doing here is we're taking sports science principles and we're applying them to sport. And jiu-jitsu is a sport like everything else, and when we apply these sports science principles to the sport and to our preparation and how we approach that and how we approach competitions, magic things can happen. When you combine that with lots of experience, which I'm very lucky to have down there with a lot of the guys, well then this is a really, really good winning recipe. And then on top of that, if you're doing really good strength and conditioning on top of this, this is where we can really start to see people shine. So just a bonus point there on intensification. You know, as the competition approaches, your efforts should be intensifying and getting closer to what you're going to have to do on competition day. And I've seen when people don't do that, that really bites them in the ass. If you enjoyed that, link below, program at the link below, really good program for Jiu Jitsu S&C. Throw the email address in there and you'll be straight working on that program today if you get it in the morning, do you know what I mean? Videos there on the program, so everything you need to know on the program. And if you're not doing anything for your Jiu Jitsu S&C currently, just go and start that, and then you're away, you're starting something, off we go. Thanks very much for watching, catch you on the next one.